The 15-Point Plan is part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network.
Welcome back to another edition of the 15-Point Plan podcast with your host. My name is Ryan Greigg, as well as my partner, Jacqueline Smith.
Hi, everyone. We are so excited to dive into yet another one of the 15 points with the 15-Point Plan. And as always, our goal is to help you increase your energy and decrease your stress using the 15-Point Plan. Today, we are going to talk about time, and we are going to start with kind of a macro conversation and then dive in and look at the micro. So, Ryan, why don't you get us started?
That's right, Jacqueline. Today we are focusing on time. And as we talked about prior to this, I feel that this could be one of the most powerful, if not most powerful points on the 15-Point Plan. And the reason I say that is we could slack off on our nutrition and get that back. We could miss a couple days of meditation and we can get that back. We could not journal for a couple days and we could probably go back and recap that. However, we know, Jacqueline, when that time is gone, it's gone forever and we can never get that back. And that makes us become ultra purposeful, hopefully with our time, how we spend our time, who we spend our time with, and overall what our life looks like. And we've gone through this exercise a couple different times with a couple different people, but it has been so powerful for me to look at this on the macro level of my entire life and the people that I love that are closest to me and what that looks like. And the exercise looks something like this. And it's a little morbid. So apologies in advance, but I think it's so powerful that we have to look at it. A couple different examples might be, number one, looking at the average lifespan of a human. The average lifespan of a human is going to go into their 70s right now, right? Going about 70s, maybe about 78 years old. My mother turns 70 in 2 weeks, Jacqueline. And now I know my mother's going to live long past the average lifespan, but for today's sake, let's just pretend that she did live to the average lifespan and she had 8 more years. And let's pretend that I saw my mom 3 times a year. If I saw my mom 3 times a year and she lived the average lifespan and she had 8 more years, what's 3 times 8? 24?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I have 24 times to see my mom. Think about that. Like if we looked at life that way, I think we'd make life in each one of those times with my mom count a little bit more. In fact, I'd probably make the time even more so knowing I only have 20 times to see my mom. Jacqueline, what are you thinking when we talk about that?
Well, I think too that you're making the assumption that you do have those 8 more years, and
Ooh.
you don't always know that, right? You could not have 8 more years. And so I think we make a lot of assumptions sometimes that we have time or we have a certain amount of time and maybe we don't.
That is incredibly powerful on that side too, because I hope my mom would live longer than that. And gosh, what if she didn't? So I
Mhm.
got to make that time count even more. Another example, right, that maybe has a more finite time frame on it is the fact that we just celebrated my son's 12th birthday. I'm going to Miami, Disney World for spring break this year because I realized, Jacqueline, and help me out with this. He's 12. I think I have like 1, maybe 2 more spring breaks with him before he says, Dad, I appreciate that, but I want to go with my friends. And you have
Well,
kids, Jacqueline. Like, what do you think about that with spring breaks, with holidays, Halloween?
mhm.
I don't have many more of those. I better make this spring break count.
Yeah, we raised 4 boys, and luckily our boys, I think, still loved spring break all the way up till, their adulthood. But it definitely makes you think when you think about, just a few more years and he'll be out on his own and then eventually building a family and having his own spring break with his own kids one day. So
That's
those
right.
memories
That's
to
right.
cherish. Yeah.
And so making sure that we are spending our lives and our time with the people that we love the most in the best way that we possibly can. And one of the things that really helped me get all those important events in my line of sight was getting that annual calendar this year. That was something that changed the way I looked at the entire year. I put all the important things on that annual calendar, that spring break trip, my mother's 70th birthday, my trip with my best friend, and then I fill things in around there. And that
Mhm.
was a real big game changer for me. In fact, I shared a quote that Rob Deerdeck mentioned in regards to time and his health. And he said, I designed a balanced life that would make me healthy first and then he fit life into it. I thought that was pretty neat. I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
neat. And for those that don't know, Rob Dyrdek, I think his net worth is close to $500 million. He has the Fantasy Factory, a skateboard company, and many, many other businesses. He's an incredibly successful person, but he also does what he loves at the highest level. And he is a time master.
Yeah, I think that it's so important. Like when I hear you talk about that, I think a lot of times we feel like, oh well, I don't have time to pursue, health and time with my family and business. So we always feel like, oh, maybe we have to sacrifice one or the other. Or we swing the pendulum the other direction, and it's like we don't actually pursue goals because we are so attached to this quote unquote balance, this elusive life balance
Hmm.
that people talk about. And I've just learned over time that I do have limited time on this earth. I have limited time to have an impact. And I heard Gary Vee say recently that fulfillment is found in the extremes. And so if you want
Mhm.
to go live a simple, very simple life and just, be chill and take it easy, that's one extreme. And then the other is, live life out loud and live life, full throttle, and not in a burnout way, because I think that the highest producing people or the highest performers that I've studied, what I've learned over time is they actually do focus on health, and they actually do focus on, I mean, that's the definition of high performance, is you are actually achieving big things, and but you're not sacrificing your relationships or your health or anything in that process. And I think how that happens is in the day to day, the ability to have that big full life without sacrificing. It's in how we learn to use our time.
Absolutely, 100%. Jacqueline, I'd never heard that line before, though. I want to make sure our listeners heard that. You said live life out loud. I love that. I'd never heard that. People say, like, don't let others dim your light, but live life out loud. I'd never heard that. Thank you for sharing that. I really love that.
Yeah.
So, in living
um
our life out loud and bringing this down into our daily activities and our
mm.
purpose and having a clarity, what does that look like for us, Jacqueline?
Well, I think a lot of times people are, I mean, we just waste so much time. And in our company, as you know, we've done different time studies over the years, and we have different tools that we've implemented to, I guess, take stock of how we're using our time and actually be aware of it. And I look at this the same way. Like you said, you can replace money, you can get certain things back or kind of recoup, but we can't with time. And so I know a lot of people, they live on a budget. I know a lot of people don't too, but a lot of people live on a
Mhm.
budget and they're very disciplined with their finances. But then time is money, right? It's more valuable than money. And yet we kind of blow our time without really even thinking about it. And so for me, learning, and I have to come back to this over and over again in my life, but having a plan for my day, having clarity on what it is that I need to accomplish that day, and then evaluating at the end of every day, what worked with how I used my time and what didn't work with how I used my time, and making those adjustments. And I think sometimes too often we're just living kind of on autopilot and we're not really taking stock, and we're just really, I say that, blowing our time,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I
So
know that I've been guilty of that in the past.
yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. So I think too, sometimes we tend to take stock of things when we're maybe realizing we're in a bad spot. So some time goes by and we're not where we want to be. And maybe we take this big stock, like daily, life stock of how we're living and what we're doing with our time. But how powerful is it when you take stock every day? And you can make adjustments instead of once a year at the end of the year when you're setting your goals, or maybe midpoint way through the year, but you're actually doing that on a daily basis. Your use of time, it won't be perfect, but over time doing that, you will be way light years ahead of anyone else. I think having that clarity for one is the foundation really. Like what is it to win the day, you know? And I know Ben has a the daily plan that a lot of us use, and he's done a podcast or episode or two on that over on the Win Make Give podcast that listeners can hop over and listen to. And right now our whole team, we're doing this together as a way to rebuild that habit. But one of the things I really noticed, Brian, and maybe you can speak to this, is when we don't have clarity and then we're doing things that are uncomfortable every day, sometimes our lack of focus or lack of discipline with our time is actually a coping mechanism because we're uncomfortable. So we scroll, we're uncomfortable. So we get up and, have to go get a snack. Like we're just kind of like wanderers, right? And whenever we have to do something uncomfortable, one of the coping mechanisms can be to allow distractions and seek distractions. And so a lot of times for me, my issue is not actually always a time management issue. It's a self-management issue. It's a self-regulation and emotional regulation issue. And being aware of what's going on for me internally, I can actually navigate that. What are your thoughts on that?
That was so good. There's so much to unpack in there, Jacqueline. And what I'm hearing is this idea of, well, when we lack clarity, that often comes from lacking our goals. Maybe we don't have a clear,
Mhm.
big vision or a big dream that's pushing us to work. If we want something bad enough, we will keep that phone away. We will work only on that. But if we don't know what we want, if we don't have clarity, it's going to be easier to get distracted. And then that calling the distraction a coping mechanism, that was like, oh, ouch. Because I've felt that. I've done that where I'm just not wanting to do something, right? I'm just not wanting to do it. So let me find the easiest way to get around that. And that's a distraction. Break that word down though, distraction. We just lost traction. We just put ourselves
Mhm.
backwards. We just put
Good.
ourselves backwards, and like in looking at the numbers and the time and the macro, let's break down the micro for a little bit of what that means to us. Let's say I got distracted for just 5 minutes one time a day during my business, right? So let's say I'm working 5 days a week and I got distracted just 5 minutes, Jacqueline. It's only 5 minutes, Jacqueline. It's just I'm scrolling Instagram for 5 minutes. I'm just getting up to talk to my admin for 5 minutes. It's only. But the problem with that is when we do the math on that and you look at 5 minutes a day times 5 days a week, at the end of the year, that equals 20 hours of work time you lost. In other words, if we spent just 10 minutes a day, so double that, just 10 minutes a day distracted, losing traction, you just gave up 40 hours at the end of the year. In other words, 10 minutes a day equals one lost work week at the end of the year. You just gave up your vacation. But the problem is, Jacqueline, I'm still taking that vacation. I,
Mm.
I'm not, so we just lost a week. 10 minutes a day equals one entire work week lost at the end of the year. Just 10 minutes of distraction a day. Because we're not clear on our goals, because we're not clear on our vision, because we need this coping mechanism, we just
Mhm.
lost an entire work week at the end of the year. That is so powerful. That will keep me on track. And if I can combine that with a clear vision, with clear goals, and a drive and a
Mhm.
purpose to get out of bed, now I'm getting back towards that state of being unstoppable and finding the potential that we're all capable of.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that. And it sounds like what you're talking about, it's really like death by a thousand cuts, when you're just like, it's kind of the same thing. I was talking to a friend the other day and she said, my husband, he likes to buy things. And the problem is that they're only $10 things. But when you buy enough $10 things, it adds up to a lot. And it's kind of the same thing, right? What you're saying with the time. It's like, yeah, all these 5-10 minute distractions. Now, we're not saying like don't have a break and be so over scheduled that you have no white space in your calendar, but I'm working on being more intentional with my white space and with my breaks, like just not just like when I'm supposed to be doing something else and picking up my phone and scrolling on social media, or when I'm supposed to be doing something else and I get up and go talk to my, assistant and it could wait till later. I just don't feel like doing what I'm supposed to be doing now. So
That's right.
that's what I'm talking about when I say like seeking or allowing distractions. And really that's just it's a habit and a self discipline. And I think when we have discipline and structure, it does bring a lot of freedom. And sometimes we avoid discipline and structure because we value freedom. But if you
Hmm.
value freedom, then knowing that discipline, structure, clarity, and a plan will actually bring you more freedom.
God, that's so good. And it's like we think the opposite, but we know that when we do that, that is the ultimate freedom. The
Mhm.
ultimate freedom lies in the fact of doing the one thing that we need to do at that time because we know when we get distracted, it's not just those couple minutes of distraction, but now we've broken our state of flow. It's going to take a couple minutes to get back into that.
Mhm.
And an action item for our listeners, like you mentioned, is to track this. We've talked about tracking. If you're not tracking in a lot of areas of your life, if you're not tracking, you're slacking. And if you track your time and what your day looks like, that might be taking a sheet of paper and writing each hour out and breaking that down even farther. What are you doing every 15 minutes? What does that look like? Are you doing something that is in alignment with your dreams and your goals and your big vision? And Ben said this a long time ago, Jacqueline, and it's always haunted me. He said, just pretend like some of the people that you love are looking over your shoulder. Just
Mhm.
pretend like your partner, your spouse, your son, the closest person in your life is just they're right there behind you looking over your shoulder during each one of those 15-minute chunks. And at the end of the day, when you walk out of there, would that person be impressed or would they be depressed?
Yeah, that's always impacted me. And, we've talked a lot about your time in business. And there's also a saying I've heard, like, how you show up in one area is usually how you show up in many. So my guess is that if you're someone who is really not disciplined, and there's no shame, it's just that you haven't built that habit, or maybe you've gotten out of the habit of being more disciplined with your time. Really what that is you're being undisciplined with your presence and with your attention. And I would bet money that if I were to follow you around at home, that you're probably the same way with your kids or your spouse. If you're like that at work, you're probably like that in other areas as well. And so, really, what this is building a habit of being where you are and being present and purposeful with your time. And I bet you on your trip coming up to Disney World, you probably, if you haven't already, you will create a plan and kind of have a bit of a maybe itinerary for each day, and you spend the time to do that. And because you want to pack as much in, right? I
That's
know
right.
my boys, they talk about their Disney World trip, and like they were packing it, running all over the place, packing as much in as they could. Well, what if you didn't do that, you know, and maybe you didn't experience as much as a result of just kind of winging it and not doing any research and not coming up with a plan? Well, that's what we do every day. If we just go through the motions and we're not practicing presence and purposefulness in our life, and it will impact more than just your work. It impacts your family, it impacts your health. And so I think that's why we talked about how this is probably one of the most impactful topics, is because
Mhm.
it does impact everything. And I think it's something that we don't really realize how much we waste.
We don't. We absolutely don't. And if we track it, we might realize that. And if we have that realization, then we can take action, right? And we can
Yes.
make a plan. Because if we don't plan, then you know what they say. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I did not intend on failing in my plan to Disney World, Jacqueline. And I think you nailed that, right? Like if we're here now, if we're where we are, where our feet are, then we're here in the present. And remember, it's called the present for a reason because it's a gift to us. So let's make the most of the present moment and not be distracted and work towards our dreams and goals so that we can progress in life and be the person that we know we are capable of being.
Absolutely.
Time,
Well,
time. We cannot
yes,
get any more of it, Jacqueline. We can't get any more of it. So let's use it to the best of our ability. Remember, can't get any more. And the little minutes matter. Every minute matters. Let's make the most of every moment. Speaking of the most of every moment, if you haven't had a chance to check out our other podcast network, the winmakegive.com carries all of them. There's a ton of other very valuable podcasts on there. And of course, follow Jacqueline Ray Smith and myself, Bentley's Old Man, on Instagram or all other social media platforms. Jacqueline, anything else to leave our listeners with for today?
If you want to dive deeper and be in a community of people who are walking out the 15-point plan, find us in our Facebook group. It is just 15-point plan group. And we are there. Ryan and I are both in that group. And we even have a Wednesday call you can hop on if you want to dive deeper into the topic of the week. But share your wins, share your journey. We love to hear from you. And we are so thankful for your listening and your sharing and your support. And we will talk to you guys next time on the next episode.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, all.